Hi, my babes. So I meant to do the second part of the Waspy walkthrough last week, but I actually had a new intern get started, so I had to kind of show her the ropes so she can help me get my schedule a little cleared up before I move and do some traveling and focus on some really cool bridal orders and some sort of unrelated projects that I've got coming up that I hope everybody will be into. So bear with me here. I did get some really cool video suggestions in the meantime, though. I'll probably get to work on the second part of that Waspy video, like, on Thursday? Oh, bye, Zipper. So it looks like my fickle rodent co-host has left us for adventure. That's fine, I guess. She's actually running around like a mad rat right now, and it's really cute. So one of the cool suggestions that I got was from Alex Tor Corsetry, and he suggested that I talk about not really tips and tricks for making corsets, but tips that have failed, which I thought was a really interesting idea, and I wanted to get on that right away. So here are some things that I've tried over the past, I don't know how many years of making corsets that didn't work for me. Now, some of these things I actually do know for a fact that other people do, and it works just fine for them. And plus, there's like a million ways to make a corset. There's some definitely wrong things you can do, but there's no like one right way to make a corset. So these are mostly my own personal failures. And there's always exceptions to the rules. So let's go. So one of the first failed experiments I wanted to talk about is actually one of those that falls into kind of a gray area, because I A, do something kind of similar, and B, know at least two makers that I very much admire who definitely do this, at least sometimes, and they make irrefutably beautiful things. And I never want to underestimate my capacity to fail completely and terribly at a simple thing. So basically, what I want to talk about is using spray adhesive. This probably isn't the brand people use. This is just what I use for my embroidery projects. But on at least like a couple of occasions, I've thought, no, I don't need to use fusing for this. I can just spray adhere my fashion fabric to my coutil and that'll flatline it and that'll do the job. But anytime I've tried it, by the time I'm like actually sewing the corset, it's completely come apart. And in at least one case, I finished the corset and I got bubbles throughout the thing and had to chuck it eventually. So I do know that there are some makers who use it as sort of like a roll pinning substitute for materials like vinyl and leather stuff that you can't really like puncture, like you can't part a weave the way that you can with like cotton. And I've kind of tried that with mixed results, so that's certainly viable. So it's sort of but for me, it didn't work. So, whoops. Similarly, I'm not really a fan of like Pellon Wonder Under. That's probably the most common brand of fusing that you can find at like craft stores and stuff like that. And anytime I've tried to use it, it's sort of fallen apart and been sort of flimsy. And I really prefer varieties of iron-on adhesive that sort of give the fabric like a little more body, like give it a different hand. And I don't really want to go into what brand specifically I use because I sort of spent a long time experimenting with different things to find what really worked well for me. And it's not actually that hard to find. But I will save you the trouble. Skip Pellon. Unless you think I'm wrong. Also, I've really got to say that you guys have been super respectful about that. Like, I was nervous about making any tutorial videos or anything like that, because while I feel like sharing knowledge betters all of us, I know a lot of people sort of have worked a really long time and spent a lot of money developing their own techniques and stuff. and that they're sort of protective of their trade secrets and feel like that's what keeps them competitive. And that's fine. I don't totally disagree, but there was a period of time where a lot of people would come to me just sort of asking me to spoon feed them all of their resources and information and stuff without having to sort of like get there themselves and go through that process of development and trial and error and stuff. But this new batch of corset makers that have been like sort of getting into the game recently are really so respectful and so sweet. The rats are messing with my pattern paper. I'm sorry, guys. And I just really appreciate how resourceful and like not entitled people have been about this. So thank you for being super cool. This one isn't so much a failed experiment. I mean, I definitely like did use my share of this when I was like a wee baby, but just sort of a thing that like as a corset maker, like getting started, you should know better than is don't use plastic bones. The one exception I would say is sort of synthetic whalebone, like the German plastic that you can get from corsetry suppliers. I've never personally used it, but as far as I can tell from other makers who've been experimenting with it a lot recently, it's pretty legit because it more accurately sort of substitutes whalebone that was used in 19th century corsets. And it works really great for recreation patterns, like if you're going through for a more authentic historical silhouette, but it's not great for like waist training corsets necessarily. But the plastic that the plastic that beginners buy is like feather light, like plastic bones, like from the craft store. And I don't know why people making their first corset always insist on getting this stuff, because it's not even cheaper. It's really not cheaper than buying a hoop of steel. It's not easier, and it's guaranteed to like wreck your corset in like a few ways. First of all, I don't have a sample of it because why would I have it? The plastic threads that go up through it eventually kind of tear up your fabric because it's not really like capped or in any way, but there are ways to seal it, I guess. I don't really use it. But inevitably that stuff comes through fabrics, especially sort of like the unreinforced cottons and stuff that you'll generally see someone cutting corners by using plastic and it doesn't work. And a lot of people mistakenly think that the steel bones in a corset contribute in some way to the reduction or the shape or something and say, well, I'm just making a costume piece. I'm not making a tight lacing corset or waist training corset. And the thing is, the reason that you put bones in a bodice or a corset or something is that it distributes the vertical tension of the fabric and it keeps everything held upright and smooth. And so when you put something floppy and flimsy in there, the whole thing just sort of crumples together. Like a lot of people make the mistake of like putting bones in the back of a bodice, not putting bones, putting grommets in the back of a bodice without bones, and they lace it up and the whole thing goes scrunch because it's not providing any support. And that's all bones do, is they sort of smooth everything out and give you an elegant line. And the other thing about that is plastic bones don't have as much tensile strength as steel or even as your own body. So eventually those plastic bones will get kinks and warp. Like if you ever bought like a cheap costume bodice and it was just like jabbing you in the ribs, it was just all stabby stab after a while and it got these nice little wavy crumples. Well, it's because like the heat of your body warms up the plastic and it becomes deformed and warped, and not really a lot of avoiding that. I do know people that use like heavy duty like industrial zip ties. I could see that working for mock-ups. Like I said, I have not personally tried it. I don't have any reason to. using plastic doesn't really save you much money. Like, a hoop of steel is pretty cheap. So just like save yourself the trouble. Don't bother. Don't ruin your project. Just get some steel. So another thing that came to mind, I don't think I have it anymore. I think I gave it away. But one of my own personal failures is I at one point tried to use a binding machine to make my not my binding, because I fold that by hand, but my external boning channels. And I like to reinforce whatever fabric I'm using for my boning channels to make it a little sturdier and keep bones from going ripping out of it eventually. And that broke the thing. It's like a electric iron thing, and it's got like a little wheel, and you feed your fabric through a bias tape maker, and it spins it out the other side as binding, like bias tape. And anything I used was too thick for it, and it went kaput. So I broke things. It's probably not that feasible. I'm sure it's fine for your like actual like binding, but for your external channels, I recommend something different. Actually, when I make external channels, I use this. It's a clover loop pressing bar, and I've always gotten like pretty consistent good results making external channels from them. They used to be, the external channels I used to make used to be like really wobbly and weird, and I think I used, it was so long ago, I think I used like a metal bias tape maker, and this has just worked a lot better for me, so maybe I'll do a video on how to make these sometime. Again, I'm sorry about the crinkle tinkles and noises in the background here. The rats are being extra cheeky today because they know that I'm filming and not like doing important tasks like giving them yogis and pats. So another failed experiment, which a lot of people will disagree with me about, is duct tape forms. I really hate them, you guys. I'm sorry. When you stuff a duct tape form, they get like super easily distorted because just like the nature of filling a thing like expands it, and you can't pin through them without getting your pins like super sticky, and they're just really like unreliable, and they look like garbage. I'm sorry. I've never seen a duct tape form, like even ones that were like covered all nicely or whatever, that like didn't look stupid. I did a different thing, which I don't necessarily recommend because it was the most pain in the ass, worst project that I have ever undergone, but I was like determined to make it happen. I've got this lady. Yay! She's not like the most beautiful like dress form goddess or anything, but she's me shapes. I that's a little intimate. So I want to redo this at some point, maybe, but I haven't used her as much as I thought I would. She's a plaster cast insulation foam dress form. Like, I covered myself in plaster and actually took quite a few attempts because first I used too weak of a grade of plaster and it busted apart and it wasn't really strong enough, and then I used medical grade and I needed more layers than I thought I did, and like I almost passed out standing there for an hour waiting for the plaster to dry. But my poor wife got dragged along for this project, and basically what I did was I used a varnish to seal the inside of the plaster cast, and then I stuffed it with insulation foam, which expands. And if you don't use the right kind, it won't expand enough. I don't remember all the details, but I filled it with insulation foam, and then I sewed the cast up the sides, and I put a crappy stand in it. You can see the insulation foam here. I never bothered to cover the bottom. Isn't that nasty? This stuff gets on everywhere and on everything, and will like stick to your clothes and your body until the end of time because it loves you and wants to be with you forever. And then I covered the form in batting, which kind of made it soft and squishy and smooth. And then I made a jersey knit cover for it, which kind of doesn't look great, but I pinned in all of the sort of little creases. She's got a belly button. So this project was the worst, most awful experience ever, and I don't necessarily recommend it, but you can pin through it and you can drape on it really easily, and it works. So if you hate yourself, you can try it, I guess. There's lots of tutorials and stuff on making insulation dress forms online. I sort of just did a ton of research and combined things I learned from all of them. So, not necessarily recommended for your own safety and sanity, but effective. Really, I just need something squishy. I want a squishy dress form like an alva form. I covet alva forms really badly. That'd be perfect for corsets. But if you make a lot of dresses and drape non-corset stuff, or you make a lot of stuff for yourself, it's cool. It helped me develop my lordosis patterns. That's the main reason I made it, is I needed some way of recreating that hyperlordotic spinal curvature in my corsets, and that really helped me develop those patterns. So I'm glad I did it. So another thing that I vaguely recall trying really early on was putting wide spiral steels at the back edge of corsets, like around the grommets. And what you usually do is you put spring steels like these at the very, very back edge to sort of like sandwich the grommets. I haven't put grommets in this bad boy yet, but you can sort of see what I mean, and it sort of keeps it stiff and supported, like I mentioned earlier. And I have, like I mentioned earlier, I have a hyperlordotic posture. Like I have interior pelvic tilt, and I thought the solution to sort of like having pinching and back pain at the very back of the corset was to make it more flexible. And I do like to use softer spring steels, but this is too floppy. I sort of had like a curve here, and I thought, oh, I can make the back sit more curvy by having more flexible bones. And I think at one point I was like visiting with another corset maker or something, and she grabbed my corset, and she was like this, like doing like this in the back, and she's like, I've never seen backbones this flexible before. What's going on here? And I was like, I think I used normal ones. And I guess I had forgotten that I used spiral steels because I gutted that corset later and I found those there, and I was like, oh, well, that didn't work. So that's a little embarrassing. I have since improved. Now I like to make a curved center back seam in my patterns, and that actually helps a lot. The spring steels will sort of kick out the hip and straighten that center back out, and it feels much nicer on my poor spine. So along the same lines as my plastic bone criticism earlier, you don't really want to bother with like common craft store grommets. I see a lot of people use this in costume stuff, and it kind of sucks because they're just really soft, and they're not like, they don't roll. They got like little teeth, and it like snags onto your ribbon, and they always fall out, and they're stupid. I use I think the brand, the manufacturer is called Rowley. I use like a 00 Rowley grommets, and they've got a little mushroom on a little plate, and they stick together. I know a lot of makers prefer Prim. I am like the only person on the planet that hasn't tried it, not for any particular reason, just because like I've always gotten these. I think the actual manufacturer website has closed, and I guess that's my life now. But you can get these on like a general corset making websites, and they sell them at Tandy Leather, way at a way overpriced price. But if it's an emergency and you've run out of grommets with like 2 left on an order that needs to go out tomorrow, you can go to Tandy and pay the retail markup for these guys. So those have always worked really well for me. So the last thing that I can think of in terms of failed experiments is pressing open your seams. This is sort of a gray area one because there is, I believe, a strong exception to the rule. Some very respectable makers, including myself, sometimes like to press open the seams if you straddle it with a casing and keep the tension away from the actual seam thread stitches. But if you press it open and you have like a casing on either side of an open seam, that stuff's just gonna go rip. And I mentioned this in my Waspy video, and I'm gonna kind of go over the exception to the rule and like how to do it properly. But yeah, you want a strong seam. You want like a flat felled seam or just like a welt seam. So maybe don't do that. The only exception to the rule that I can think of is my Timeless Trends corsets have a pressed open seam like that. And when I was at the factory, I saw them, it was like wizardry. Like they were like lock stitching in the ditch of the seam. Like they were just like eyeballing it, like lining up the seams of like 2 layers and lock stitching it together and then putting in the boning channels on either side. And they have like a lifetime guarantee, so I don't think you could get that seam to rip. So I guess that's the exception. So if you contain their magic powers within you, then you can do that. But I don't know. Don't. All right, babes. I think that's it. Thank you again, Alex, for the cool suggestion. I really like that topic idea. Really feel free to PM me and send me any other suggestions or questions that you have, because that's actually pretty cool. Yeah, so I have to go figure out what kinds of destruction the rats have wreaked. It looks like Zipper has decided that my bag of litter is her own personal dig box. So she's back there going dig, 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 and throwing litter everywhere. So I have some stink children to wrangle. This is nice chatting with you. I'll see you again soon. Bye! So there's actually another funny story I remembered as I was editing. It was actually a huge boo-boo. I did this years ago. I noticed that a lot of makers that I really liked said that they triple stitched all of their seams. And that's not wrong. Like, that's totally fine to do. I don't do it anymore because I have like super strong thread and it just slows down the whole process for me. But in an effort to make my seam stronger, I decided I was also going to triple stitch, and for whatever reason I interpreted that as literally sewing the seam over 3 times. I got really, really good at like following my stitch line exactly over and over again. But that was a very incorrect interpretation of what they meant. And someone in a corsetry forum, someone really nasty who I'd never even heard of before, got super aggressive and like corrected me in the most like unkind, unconstructive fashion, which was like the worst way to like address somebody making a stupid mistake. But anyway, the triple stitch on your sewing machine is it's like it's gonna look like 3 lines lined up beside each other. It's also called a stretch stitch, and it just it literally just goes back and it sews each stitch 3 times, and it will give you a stronger seam if that's something you want in your life and your process. So that was a funny mistake I made. Bye guys.